Today is March 22nd, 2024. I'm here at the village with Mr. Alton Quanbeck, and my name is Agnieszka Ilwicka-Karuna. In the room is also Deborah Hendricks and Diana Rodriguez, and this recording is part of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at University of Florida. Mr. Quanbeck, do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin with asking you about your childhood memories. What is your earliest childhood memory?
Living in the old Barnes mansion there at Oak Grove and sliding down the banister. It was an old mansion built in the 1880s probably by a very wealthy Fargoan by the name of Barnes. And the Oak Grove Lutheran High School got possession of it, and my father lived there for until they had to tear it down because it just got too decrepit. They couldn't afford to repair it. But if it had been restored, it would have been one of the historical mansions in North Dakota.
How many people were living on that property?
Just our family.
And how many people the family included?
Four at the time. My parents and my sister Dorothy. My brother David was born later, after they tore down and we had to move. And then a new residence was built on the same property.
Mm-hmm. What year were you born?
1926.
And where?
In Northwood, North Dakota, farming community.
Do you remember or do you have any stories related to your birth?
About my birth?
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't remember.
Of course you don't remember, but do you remember any stories related to your birth?
No, not really. No.
And
my mother never told me anything about it.
Were you born at the hospital?
Yes, it's a very primitive hospital in Northwood, North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. And what is the origin of your name?
Quanbeck. It's Norwegian. In Norway, it's Kvambekkk. And when my ancestors came to the U.S., they tried to anglicize it. And so it became Quanbeck, Quanbeck.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents born in America?
Yes, both of them.
Mm-hmm. And your grandparents?
My grandparents, my mother's father was born in the U.S., but my father's father was born in Norway. His name was Halvor.
Did you have chance to meet him? Do you remember?
No, he died before I was born.
Mm-hmm. And what languages were spoken at your home?
My parents were both fluent in Norwegian and in English. But we always spoke English in the home. I never learned Norwegian at all.
Do you remember any words from Norwegian?
Oh, yes.
But did they teach you on purpose, or
No, they never. They tried to downplay the Norwegian aspects. They wanted everybody to be Americanized.
Mm-hmm. And what does it mean to grow up in American and Norwegian home in America?
We were very American. The Norwegian, except for the menu. My mother used to prepare a lot of Norwegian dishes.
Do you remember them?
Oh, yes.
Can you describe?
Lutefisk and lefts. I have some lefts on the refrigerator there. and rummagrout. That's about it.
Which one was your favorite that your mother cooked?
Lutefisk.
And can you describe this dish?
It's a fish that's been cured in lye, and then you have to soak it for a long time to get rid of the lye, and then it's pretty much broiled.
Mm-hmm. How did she serve it? With potatoes, vegetables, or?
Potatoes, yeah. Potatoes and meat and potatoes were the staples of our existence. Very little emphasis on vegetables and fresh fruit. They weren't too available in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to picture the physical space of your childhood. So can you please describe me how big it was?
What?
How big was the space? How big was your home?
Well, which home? The
very first. Mm-hmm.
The first home? It was a mansion. It would probably consisted of 20 rooms or so. We lived on the upper floor, and you had to go up long stairs, and then there was a large living area and bedrooms, and very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Were you the only people living at that mansion?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They had classes downstairs sometimes.
Mm-hmm. What was your father's profession?
He started out as a Lutheran minister. Then he came to Oak Grove and was first the principal. Later he became the president of the Lutheran High School.
Mm-hmm. And what were the mainly duties for your mother? Was she working?
No, she was a homemaker. She graduated from Augsburg. She was the first woman graduate of Augsburg College in Minneapolis, Minnesota. First woman to graduate.
How old was she?
What's that?
How old was she at the time of graduation?
I would guess 20 or so, 22, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Does it mean to you something that she was the first one to graduate as a woman?
It didn't make any difference to me. She was pretty proud of it, though.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe your parents?
Describe them?
Mm-hmm.
My father was very intelligent, very. He could sit and listen to the radio and read the congressional record and smoke his pipe and never miss a beat. My mother she was also very intelligent too, but she was a homemaker essentially. Later on, she taught in some high school classes.
Mm-hmm. Did she like to take care of the home charts?
Did she like
the home duties? Did she taking care of that?
Yeah, but that's the way things were in those days. She didn't have much choice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what was her favorite thing to do?
She had to work all the time looking after the children and the housework. Fortunately, we always had somebody staying with us that helped, a schoolgirl or something that would help her with all the daily chores.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to church as a family?
Oh yes, unfortunately, regularly, every Sunday, and I had to go to confirmation for 2 years.
How the service looked like in your place?
What is that?
How the service looked like back then?
How did what?
When you went to church,
Yeah.
the service, mass, how did it look like? What were the elements? Was it like today?
It was generally a very long sermon, and then communion, and a choir sang. The church was up in Fargo.
Yes, we were talking about church. Can you describe me the distance from your home to church? How did you go to church? Did you go or drive?
Drive.
So how? By car?
My father always had a new Chevrolet. Every year he'd get a new Chevrolet. I don't know how he did it on his salary, but he always had a new car.
And
we had to walk to Sunday school, though. We had to go to Sunday school first, but I had to walk to get there. It was about 12 blocks or so.
you and your sibling, right?
My sister and I, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was the color of your car?
We have any color. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm. And how many people were living in your community?
In Fargo, about 30,000. One black, the shoe shine at the Powers Hotel.
What was this person doing there?
What's that?
What was this person doing there?
He was a shoe shine.
Okay.
Yeah. About 30,000 were living in Fargo at the time.
So that means that the other people were white?
Mostly Scandinavian. A few Germans, but mostly Scandinavians.
What languages did you listen to as a child?
What's that?
In your community, what languages were you exposed to as a child?
Just English.
And Norwegian, right?
Yeah, but my parents always spoke English in the house. Oh, they were both fluent in Norwegian.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to Norway as a child?
No, I went there later.
When?
My wife and I made 2 or 3 trips to Norway, to the old Quanbeck estate there. Found the old place where my great-grandfather immigrated from, in logs about like that, and we slept there. The beds were only about 5 feet long. Very uncomfortable, but we stayed right there.
In what year did you go there? Do you remember?
Oh, it was probably 1980 or so. 1980. We made 2 or 3 trips there.
Were your parents still alive when you went to Norway?
No.
Mm-hmm. Did you have chance or opportunities to ask them about your grandparents?
They did. My father didn't know who his grandparents were. It's a funny thing. We did kind of a family reunion, and for some reason I became somewhat interested in genealogy. So I asked my father. He knew who his mother and father were, but he had no idea of who his grandparents were. And I asked the same question to my wife's father, and the same answer. He had no idea who his great-grandparents were.
Mm-hmm. And what about you? Did you try to pass this knowledge to your children?
The what?
Did you try to pass this knowledge to your children?
Oh yeah, this book I wrote.
Mm-hmm. Can you show this book?
What's
To the
that?
camera? Can you show this book?
Yeah. I wrote this, I think, in about 1990 or so, I guess.
What were the most interesting findings for you, or the one that really surprised you?
That Charlemagne was one of our ancestors, and that Tostig, I made several trips to the family history library in Salt Lake City and took courses out there. And I was able to get to about the 1600s to a woman by the name of Birgit Rolfsdottir. And it turned out that she was the key. And so I went to the library in Flagstaff, Arizona, of all places, and I found a book. And I found the lineage from Birgit Rolfsdottir directly to Charlemagne. And so I applied to the Order of the Crown of Charlemagne and got admitted. Mm-hmm. Took a lot of documentation and interviews with people to get in.
And what brought you this idea to create a genealogy tree?
I don't know. I guess my father told me when I was a child that we were descended from Harald Fairhair, the first king of Norway, the United Norway. And I didn't believe him. I didn't believe it was possible. But my father was not interested in genealogy at all. So I don't know how I picked up the interest.
Mm-hmm. At your home, did you have books?
Oh, yes. We read a lot. My father was reading all the time, and I read a lot.
What were your favorite books? Who were your favorite authors?
Samuel Clemens, I guess, at that time.
Who else?
What's that?
Did you read Bible?
Oh, I had to read it. I had to read it. I read it from cover to cover.
Mm-hmm. Also at home?
What's that?
At home or at church?
No, at home and at West Point, for some reason, just a kind of a comfort. I read the Bible, one chapter every night, till I got through with it.
Can you describe me why? Why at West Point did you reach the Bible?
Why did I read it?
Mm-hmm.
It just did. Life was pretty tough at West Point, and this was kind of a solace to me.
And what was the tough element of that life?
Oh, especially plebe year, they were hazing you all the time. You had to brace for meals, and upperclassmen were always hazing you. So, and everything was regimented. You had to get up and have your bed made by 6 o'clock in the morning, and go out to the formation, march to the dining hall, and march to all the classes. It was pretty rigorous, and I was very poorly prepared for my first year at West Point, but gradually things got better all the time.
What do you mean by saying poorly prepared?
In mathematics. My father made me graduate from high school in 3 years. So I went 1 year to Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota. And then I thought I'd be pretty well prepared for West Point, but I found out that in math particularly, I wasn't very well prepared.
Do you remember your teachers?
No. I remember one, Dr. Ilwicka-Karuna. Remember him from Concordia College. I remember all the teachers in high school.
Can you describe them to me?
The teachers? Ida Jackson taught the Bible classes. She was a big, ungainly woman. And then Inga Olsen taught some classes and directed the choir. And then Arnie Onstead went to the World War II and then came back. And he was pretty much limited in his vocabulary. He was very Norwegian. And Erling Tungseth was there. He was a very good teacher.
What was he teaching?
What's that?
What was the subject?
Algebra and my father had to teach a lot of subjects just because at certain times there weren't teachers available to teach them, and my father would have to fill in.
Yeah. Yeah. I am just trying to understand what was your family social position at that time when you were growing up within the community.
Within the community, they had a lot of friends, but there was no differentiation in the community as far as social status or wealth was concerned. Everybody was pretty much equal.
Did it change when you went to college? For you?
No, not really. I met some very wealthy friends and a wealthy girlfriend. But I've never been conscious of it.
Was it important for you?
What's that?
Was this aspect important for you ever?
Wealth? No, never.
What about education?
What's that?
What about education?
Well, that was very important to me because for some reason, when I was fighter pilot at Truax Air Force Base, they told me I received an offer to go back to teach at West Point. So I went to Purdue for 1 year and get my master's in engineering mechanics. And so when I went back to West Point to teach, I'd go down to Columbia to start preparing for my doctorate. So education was very important to me. My father eventually earned his doctorate at the University of Southern California.
How old was he when he managed to do it?
he was probably 45 or 50 years old.
Mm-hmm. What was his subject?
Religious education.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that it is important to study religion and make it a subject?
No, not really. I pretty much lost my religious inclinations in recent years.
And when did it happen?
Oh, gradually over time. About the time my wife died, I just stopped going to church, and she became very religious in the later parts of her life. So I'd go to church with her. But after she died, I just lost interest in going.
But did you lose interest in going to religious community or in religion at all?
Both. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what was your faith?
Lutheran.
Mm-hmm. Did there were any specific holidays or Lutheran traditions that you remember that were making you more distinctive from others?
No, not really. There were no specific Lutheran holidays. Just the regular American holidays, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas was very important to us.
Can you describe your Christmas, your home Christmas?
Well, it was always a lot of preparation, and even though the family budget was strained, they'd always manage to have a few nice presents for us, ice skates or something like that.
Did you, as a child, did you go out ice skating?
Oh, that's all I did in the wintertime. We get started ice skating in November and continue until March. And I played a lot of hockey.
With whom?
With either a group, a formal group that was organized, or just informal.
Mm-hmm. And when you were growing up there, what was your sister doing? The same, or she had some different interests?
I don't recall that she had any particular interest. She was musical. I had no musical ability whatsoever, but she had some, and so she sang in the choir, and she was pretty academically inclined also.
Mm-hmm. And later in her life, what career did she decide to do?
She married and became a homemaker, had 4 children.
Mm-hmm. Great. And what about you? Let's talk about your education and step by step. How did you become whom you became? So first you graduated from high school.
Yeah.
And then?
Then I went to West Point.
Mm-hmm. For how
graduated there in 1948.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was recruited to go back to West Point to teach. So I went to Purdue University, got my master's degree in engineering mechanics in 1953. And then eventually I did some other graduate work at Columbia, the University of Wisconsin, and Colorado, and then finally finished up at Stanford, got my PhD there in 1963.
How old were you when you got your PhD?
1926 subtracted from 1963, which would be what? About 40 or so.
Yeah. Great. And I would like to ask you about the impact of the Second World War on your life in particular. Was there any?
We were very conscious of the Second World War. My Uncle Gordy, my father's youngest brother, was a Navy fighter pilot in World War II and fought in the Pacific. And that gave me the incentive to be a pilot. We followed the war very closely.
Did you talk at home about your father's brother?
Oh, yes. We didn't hear from him very much, but he was always a subject of interest to the family.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't ask you about the Great Depression. Did Great Depression have impact on your family?
Oh, yes. Sometimes my father would go months without getting any salary. And I remember one time my mother started crying because she could only give us milk and crackers for dinner. So there were times when it was pretty tough for us. And we'd go down to the grocery store and they'd try and charge everything they could. And eventually they'd have to pay up. So the Depression was a tough time for us. Tough time for the school, too.
For how long?
Oh, 4 or 5 years. Things started picking up about 1940, 41, after Franklin D. Roosevelt got president.
From the perspective of time, you know, you lived long enough to have multiple perspectives. So from the perspective of time, what do you think was the real impact of Great Depression on American society?
It was tough, really tough times for everybody. In North Dakota, there's some crop failures there, and so the farmers didn't have much income. But fortunately, the farmers had cattle and dairy farms, so they could always eat. But people in the city, a lot of them didn't have work either, so it was tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question about your education in the Army, about the West Point. Can you describe just step by step, how was it to first enter the school and then get this education to become whom you became, which was a pilot?
Well, everybody took the same courses at West Point except languages. You had a choice between Spanish, French, and German, and I think that was it. And everybody else took all the way through got the same curriculum. And then after I graduated from West Point, I went directly into flight training and basic training in San Antonio, Texas at Randolph Air Force Base. And then went to Williams Air Force Base for the jet training. And graduated there in 1949, in class 49C.
Mm-hmm. And what language did you choose from those three that were available?
French. And I don't remember any of it.
And why French, not Spanish?
I don't know why.
Or German?
I don't know why. I just took French.
It didn't take long for you to participate in the war, right? After graduating from school.
I went first to Hamilton Air Force Base and flew F-84Ds there. And there were six West Point classmates there. And by 18 months later, I was the only one left alive.
How does it feel?
Didn't feel anything. Didn't bother me. Well, Pat Gillum was my best friend there, and he and I volunteered to go to Korea. And the squadron, the group commander didn't want us to go, but fortunately I was aide to Speedy Rush, General Speedy Rush, and he told, let us go. And so we were off to Korea.
What was the plane?
What was that?
What was your plane?
F-80s. Pat Gillum flew F-51s and he got killed on a ground support mission.
What was his name?
What's that?
What was his name?
Pat Gillum. Mm-hmm. He was from Richmond, Virginia. He and I were together, we were roommates at Hamilton Air Force Base.
How did you feel after losing friend?
Didn't feel anything. He became numb to it. At the time, now I feel a little strongly about it.
At that time of your service, did Army give you any room or space to go through the process of grieving?
No. And none whatsoever. It was just a way of life, that's all.
Do you think that there is any alternative at the Army to I don't know, to make it as if this is a non-existing experience when you lose a comrade, a friend? Like, in your opinion, is there any other way at the Army to...
Not really, no. We just come through World War II where the losses were massive, you know, on both sides. And so life was pretty cheap in those days. People look at life a lot differently now than they did in those days. And of course, in the Civil War, it was even worse.
And when you were at the Army, that was also the view that life is cheap? At the time when you were at the Army?
In the Air Force or Army?
Well, Air Force, yes.
Air Force, yeah. No, it didn't worry about it too much. I never, when I was flying missions, I never even thought about it.
And what do you think today when you think about things that you have experienced?
I don't worry about it anymore. I'm lucky to survive.
How many pilots that you knew did survive?
Well, I had a few good friends that went through the Korean War. Some got killed in Vietnam later on, but I had several good friends got through up 100 missions there in Korean War with no trouble at all.
Mm-hmm.
There were some cowards that were afraid to go attack a target.
Were you ever afraid?
No, never.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you about the history of the Air Force in America, because I know from your writing that it was just freshly established when you joined.
1947, yeah. We were the first class from West Point to go into the Air Force.
Mm-hmm. What was the teaching methods that they used, or what was the teaching approach?
What
was the teaching approach or the teaching methods, the pedagogy that they used to make you pilot?
Well, we started out in T-6s, which was a training aircraft, but a pretty tricky airplane to fly. It was a tricycle landing gear, had bad habit of ground looping on you. So you had to be very careful, but I got through basic very easily, and then went on to F-80s, which was a joy to fly, but at Williams Air Force Base they had very short runways, and it was really hot in the summertime, so we had a hard time getting off the runways and take off. But it was a thrilling experience. I enjoyed it.
Those are the types of planes that require two people to operate, right?
No, the F-80 is a single plane. Mm-hmm. No, the T-33 came in later, the version of the F-80, but that was mostly a training aircraft.
Which means that you, as a pilot, you were also responsible for focusing on the...
Everything.
Mm-hmm.
You were all alone.
How does it feel?
Good. It never bothered me at all. Back on the farm in North Dakota, I was left alone a lot of time with a team of horses or driving a tractor or things like that. And so I was used to managing on my own. I was driving a car when I was 10 years old.
What about horses? How old were you when you started riding horses?
On the farm, we had a horse by the name of Blackie. And I'd ride her bareback. We couldn't afford a saddle, so I'd just ride bareback all around the farm. She was a great little mare. And that gave me my lifelong interest in horses.
Mm-hmm. I would like to ask you about your career as a pilot. What is your reflection on actually becoming a pilot when you became a pilot, from the time when you only dreamt about this, when it was just imagination, how it would be?
What's it?
So the question is, how different it was to actually become a pilot from dreaming about becoming a pilot.
There wasn't much difference. I didn't dream about it too much. I just decided I wanted to be a pilot. So that's why I set my goals.
Mm-hmm. So for you, it was more like setting goal
Yeah.
and fulfilling the goal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you also try to organize your life this way?
Well, educationally I did. In the Air Force, you could kind of control your assignments, and I was, to a degree, somewhat successful in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I would like to ask you about the famous episode from Korean War. Can you please tell me the story?
What's that?
About the famous episode from Korean War?
Oh, the mission over the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's a long story.
We are here to record the long stories.
We were briefed. We went into briefing hot there, and we were briefed that the winds would be from the northwest at about 100 miles an hour. In truth, the winds were from the southwest, a jet stream, which people really didn't understand at the time. And they were from about 200 miles an hour from the southwest. And so that was the beginning of the tragedy. And then we went out to we knew it was going to be a really tough mission because it was a long mission up to the northeast coast of North Korea to a place called Changjin. And they were suspected of movement of enemy aircraft down there. And I just found out about a year ago that the flight leader was called into the 5th Air Force headquarters and told that this was a very high priority mission. And they were very concerned about it. But he never passed that on to us. We just went. But we took off, and the number 4 man, Billy Watson, chickened out. He knew it was going to be a tough mission, so he stayed on the ground. And so the 3 of us left. And then the flight leader, Bud Evans, about an hour out, his engine started. He threw a bucket in his engine, and it started vibrating. So he had to return home. So I was number 3. So I took control of the flight. Now, in retrospect, if I was Bud Evans and knowing what kind of a mission this was, I would have aborted the entire mission. But he decided to let us go on. So we went on for about 37,000 feet, flying above the clouds. It was the weather was pretty tough underneath us, but we were in the clear way up above the clouds. And so I decided to let down about 10 minutes early, and so we let down, and I found a little hole in the clouds, and so dropped down through that. But my wingman, Diefendorf, was really a top-notch pilot. He'd flown, he was an instructor from Williams Air Force Base, and he'd flown in the Acrojet, so he was able to follow me throughout the entire mission. And so we flew down, dropped down through this little hole, and came to the coastline, and I decided to let down 10 minutes early, and then it came to this coastline, and I figured just to be on the safe side, I'll head south. So we followed the coastline south, and the first thing we came to a little village, and they started shooting at us, and we got some flak off the right side. And at the same time, Diefendorf said, "Look at the airfield, it's loaded." And so I turned to the right, and there was about 20 P-63s lined up on the airfield. And we made our first firing pass, and came around, made another firing pass, made 3 passes all the time. And I was a little surprised that we didn't get any, explosions or burning. But it turns out that the Soviets had drained they drained all the tanks beforehand. So there wasn't any gas to explode. But then I found out later that from a FIF intelligence, Far East Air Force intelligence officer, that the airfield burned for 1 week afterwards. I don't know what happened. No one knows the truth. But we were flying F-80 reconnaissance missions out of Misawa over the target area there. So, and over Vladivostok as well. So this airfield was at Sukhaya Rekta. It was just about 50 miles west of Vladivostok. And so the next thing that happened, we started heading back, and it was pretty tough. We ended up over the Sea of Japan, and I got a very faint indication on my radio compass that the Daegu Air Force Base was 60 degrees to our right. So I made the decision to turn. That saved our lives. And so I turned, and we gradually finally got station passage over to Daegu, and we let straight down and landed. My wingman flamed out on the runway, and I was able to taxi, and I had 10 gallons of fuel left. So we went into the briefing tent. The base commander met us at the airplane. We landed, and because we're so long overdue, and we gave him all the details of the mission, told him everything that had happened. Went into the briefing tent and gave them went through the entire mission again. And I got back to the barracks, and all my clothes were gone, and my sleeping bag was gone. they thought we were dead. So I had to reclaim it all. Fortunately, they all gave it back to me. So the next thing that happened, the Inspector General from the 5th Air Force came out to interview us and went through all the details again of the mission. And things were pretty, we didn't know what was going to happen. And then Deef came up to me and said, "It's hit the fan." And that's when the Russian, Gromyko, complained to the UN that this airfield had been attacked. And so the president got pretty concerned. And so the State Department issued an order to relieve the wing commander and court-martial the pilots concerned. And so we faced the general court-martial. And so by that time we'd gone over the mission, told them exactly what had happened. And we didn't know we were in the Soviet Union. We thought we were probably in North Korea. And then after Gromyko complained to the UN, it really hit the fan. So we went into, Deef and I got in a Jeep that night and went in to see General Partridge, the commander of the 5th Air Force, and General Timberlake and General Spivey were there. Again, we went through the entire mission. And at the end of it, General Partridge put his arm around my shoulder and said, "You'll either get a Distinguished Service Cross out of this or a court-martial." And we got the court-martial. And the next thing that happened, we went in, one of our friends recommended Bernie Katz, who was a major. He was a judge advocate in the 5th Air Force headquarters. He said he'd take our case. And so we faced the general court-martial and they acquitted us for lack of evidence. I've got the court-martial record in there.
How did it feel to you?
It didn't bother me very much.
Were you scared?
What's that?
Were you scared?
No.
Did you know what would be the result?
I really wasn't worried. I figured.
What about your friend?
He was pretty worried. Deef was pretty worried. But I really figured it would work out all right. So as a result of that, since our names were released, the Air Force released our names. They shouldn't have done it, but they did. And so they wouldn't let us fly combat anymore, because if they figured we got captured, we got treated pretty badly. And so Deef got assigned down to the Philippines, and so his wife could join him. And I was assigned to a fighter interceptor group. And then General Spivey, who attended the briefing with General Partridge, called and wanted me to be his aide. So I became his aide there in Nagoya.
And what is the role of aide?
What's that?
When you are aide, what actually does that mean? Or
help them socially and arrange parties and things like that for him, accompany him everywhere, and then I'd fly. He had his own airplane, a B-17, and so I'd fly that with him.
What did you think about that time, Dan?
It was pretty nice. We lived in an elegant mansion there in Nagoya. A Japanese mansion. And then General Spivey's wife, I think General Spivey was fooling around with his house girl. And so when his wife came over, he cleaned out the entire staff. And I was sent down to a training facility to train F-84 fighter pilots for combat in Korea. Mm-hmm. But it was a pretty nice year.
A break, kind of, right?
Yeah.
During your service, which moment do you consider the most difficult?
Well, the most difficult was I was assigned as a forward air controller with the 25th Infantry Division. And we're right on the perimeter down there. We're getting attacked every night by the North Koreans. And so that was a pretty wild time for us. I was a forward air controller for about a month. And they rotate pilots in and out of the jobs, forward air controller. And so I went down there on the 25th Infantry Division, and with a radio man and another assistant, two sergeants, Sergeant Brotsman and Atterbury. And we were attacked every night on our left flank.
Did you lose people?
What's that?
Did you lose people?
The Army did. We were back with the headquarters, so we were relatively safe.
Mm-hmm. At that time, did you have a girlfriend?
At that time, no. I had a girlfriend when I graduated from West Point, Flora Jean Siemens. And I met her again when I was flying F-84s, but nothing happened. And then I met another girl in San Francisco, and she came over and joined our staff in Nagoya. So we were together then for about 6, 8, 7 months. She decided to go back to the U.S. and never saw her again.
And how and when did you meet your wife?
After I finished my tour in Japan and Korea, I was assigned to Truax Air Force Base, and I had an apartment close to the campus. And the Alpha Phi house was right across. I was going with one Alpha Phi girl, and she invited me to dinner there at the Alpha Phi house, and Susan, my wife-to-be, was there, and I was immediately attracted to her. And she wouldn't go out with me for a while, but later on she decided to go. And from then on, we were inseparable for 54 years.
She died in 2007, right?
What's that?
Your wife passed
Yeah.
away in 2007.
March 2nd, 2007.
How does it feel to leave after 54 years that you shared with someone else?
It was pretty tough. I really started to really appreciate what she'd done for me and the family over. And she smoked. When she was an undergraduate at the university, they gave out free cigarettes to the girls to get them hooked. And she was hooked and never gave up the cigarette habit. So she died of lung cancer. But I finally appreciated what she'd done raising the family and all our times of when I was working hard at in the Air Force jobs and some separations we did.
What do you think was her highest qualities?
She was just very patient, never got too excited. Very kind.
Did you like her parents?
No. I liked her mother, but not her father. Her father didn't like me either.
And why was that?
He would follow us around. When we were at the Air Force Academy, they moved to Colorado Springs, and he tried to persuade his daughter to leave me and move in with them. And for some reason, he didn't like me. But her mother was a very kind, generous person.
Mm-hmm. What was her name?
Mother,
What was the name of your wife's mother?
I can't remember offhand. Wilfred was her father's name. I just can't remember offhand.
That's all right. Do you remember when and where was your wife born?
She was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin on March 7th, 1933.
Did your parents had opportunity to meet her?
Yes, they liked her a lot.
And when you had children, did she have any help from grandparents?
Her mother would come and stay with us for 2 or 3 weeks after each birth. And coincidentally, Susan did the same thing with all of our grandchildren. She would fly immediately and help them for about 2 or 3 weeks till they got settled.
Mm-hmm. But then during the period of raising a child and then children, did she have any help from outside, or she was just on her own with children?
She was pretty much on her own. Two of our grandchildren, Emily and Eliza, spent a lot of time with us, and also Caroline, and Susan would pretty much mother them for long periods of time. Emily and Liza would come and stay with us in the summer for a couple of months at a time, and their mother would just disappear. We never knew where she went. Wouldn't tell us.
And as a family, but you as a father within your family that you created with your wife and then having children, what were the favorite family activities that you had?
All of the children rode horses. So that was, they were all in pony club. David was a good baseball player, and so I'd attend all of his baseball games. Al became a professional rider, and so we would also go to any events, steeplechase events that he rode in.
Do you think that the time that your military training did affect you as a father?
Yes. I was really strict and probably not understanding very well. And I didn't appreciate the things my wife did for me. Just kind of took them for granted.
Do you think that knowing today what you know, would you do things differently?
Oh yes, but it's too late.
Yeah. What do you think was the most important point of your career, professional career?
Well, it's hard to say. While I was at the Brookings Institution, I wrote 2 monographs, and one of them was on the modernizing the Strategic Air Force. And Jimmy Carter read the book, and he canceled the B-1 program. I don't know if it was a direct result of reading that monograph or not. But then Ronald Reagan got elected president and resurrected the program right away. But that was probably the most influential thing I did.
So what did you say in this book that was so influential?
We just there was a missile that could be mounted on the B-52 that had guidance systems on it and would be more effective than the B-1. And the B-1 proved to be very expensive and it turned out to be a relatively useless aircraft. But Reagan won it anyway. The Air Force was their highest priority.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that still is?
What's that?
Do you think that today it still is? The Air Force?
The B-1 is still flying.
No, well...
the B-52s are still flying.
Yeah. Yeah. What is your point on war? Just in general, war as a concept.
Oh. It's to be avoided at any cost. I was against the Iraq War. I view the war in Gaza now as very unfortunate. It's pretty unproductive. And although in the war in Ukraine, I feel that we should do everything we can to support the Ukrainians. I still see the Soviet Russia as a threat to democracy.
Do you think that today this threat is as strong as it was 70 years ago?
Probably worse.
How so?
Well, the country is badly divided now. And it wasn't that way. Although it was somewhat divided before World War II. A lot of people didn't want to, get involved in World War II at all. But now it's really divided and people don't want to support Ukraine anymore. And so I think it's very unfortunate.
Mm-hmm. So what's the alternative? If not war, then what?
Avoidance of war.
Mm-hmm. But how?
Well, we initiated some wars in Iraq and Afghanistan that were completely unnecessary. And so I think our lesson would be to just don't start those wars. There was no reason for either one of them. World War II was a different story. And Ukraine is a different story too, I see. I mean, they were invaded by the Russians, and so they have a right to defend themselves.
Deborah, do you have any questions?
Just one, was the military your like career? Did you have any other after the military? Did you have a professional life after the military, or was the military your whole career?
No. After I went to the Brookings Institution in Washington, and then from there I went to the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, which was headed by can't remember, Senator. I was responsible for investigating the assassination of General Schneider down in Chile, and also for a review of the entire intelligence budget for the Defense Department. And then after that, I went and worked for the Director of Central Intelligence. In there, my staff and I were responsible for evaluating the capabilities of overhead intelligence, satellite intelligence systems. I retired from that in about 1980.
And what did you do during your retirement? How was it for you to?
Well, we had a lot of fun. we did some skiing. Went to Norway. I had always had 2 or 3 horses, and so it was a pretty good time, and we had the farm, of course, a lot of work. But then after my wife died, my son is in Ocala, and he persuaded me to come down here about 2 years ago.
How was it for you to move from one place to another?
Move here? It wasn't very easy. Fortunately, we sold the farm right at the top of the market, and so that helped. And then, but it's tough for me to adjust here. I don't have very many friends. I see my son and his wife come by about once a week. We have dinner, fresca.
I heard from many people that it's difficult to make friends in general at the time of the third part of life, the time when you are retired, when you don't have professional environment. Do you think that there is a solution to that or not? It's just part of life and we have to accept it.
It's part of life. Not much we can do about it. Now, you know, I hated to leave Virginia because I'll have quite a few friends there. But on the other hand, my son is in Ocala, and I see him, and he's very kind to me. And so doing the best I can till time to die.
Do you have any recipe for a good and healthy retirement?
No. I really don't. I guess I'm just lucky. I see a lot of people around here. Most of them have lost their memories, or it just. I'm fortunate. Even at my advanced age, I'm pretty well off.
How does it feel to actually live in the community which is not so divided? I mean that in normal world, outside of community living, people have diverse options. There are small children, middle-aged people, then elder people, and then finally the eldest. But here it's different because pretty much everyone is closer to older age, except staff and people that are in charge of the place. How does it feel to be in such place?
I just make the best of it, that's all. It seems my day is pretty well filled up. I spend a lot of time on the computer, read the Washington Post every day. That takes about 3 or 4 hours. and I try to exercise as much as I can.
What is your exercise routine?
They have exercise classes here every day at 11 o'clock. I try to go to them. And then they have a fitness center here, and I work out there 30 minutes every other day. So I keep pretty active.
Wow. That's a great that's a great achievement. Congratulations on the self-discipline. Diana, do you have any questions?
Yeah, sorry, I'm like, should I borrow or do
You can
just
have
lean
this,
in?
yes. You can speak to the microphone.
Yes. So I always wondered, how is preparing to be part of that military life? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I always wondered how it was to kind of prepare. So how do you think West Point helped you prepare to going into war and participating in activities that quite nobody else would really do?
Well, your training at West Point is very strict discipline. Mm-hmm. And all your teachers and faculty members are career military, so it's pretty much a way of life. Mm-hmm. And so going to war is kind of accepted. If the country needs you, that's it. Mm-hmm. You don't even think about it.
So it's that discipline factor then.
Yeah.
That really just...
And the attitude too.
Mm-hmm. What do you think is the right attitude for a soldier, like for someone to be part of the military life?
Don't question, no. Don't question, just do it.
Okay. So, and after you left those very dangerous, intense situations with the Korean War, maybe I missed it. Did he go to any other, just the Korean War?
Yeah, that's the only war I was in.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. How was it? How was it adjusting back into, I know that you taught at West Point, you kind of stayed in that, in the sort of military life, but how was it just coming back home? How was that?
I had a little trouble adjusting. I was very, very strict in dealing with the children and So, in retrospect, I just didn't have much. I treated my children a little unfairly there.
I mean, but I'm sure that they've understood so far, like later in life, they come to understand.
We have a good relationship with all of my children now, so I guess they understand.
I'm a bit of a romantic. So would you tell us how you met your wife and how your marriage was?
I met her at the Alpha Phi house, and at first she wouldn't go out with me because I was dating her sorority sister.
Oh?
But then she relented, and I was always attracted to her. And once we got started, it didn't stop. And I remember one time, we've been going together about a year, about a month and a half or so. And she was out in front of the Alpha Phi house with her suitcase packed, and said she wanted to elope.
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 Did you?
I had to talk her out of it.
Oh.
And finally we had a pretty big wedding at his Episcopal Church in Madison.
How was that wedding? How did you feel on your wedding day?
Show her the McCall's magazine. It's right in there.
In the drawer?
Yeah.
Find that one.
McCall's is now defunct.
Can you see it okay in the camera?
Wow. The eyes, Susan.
And this is her?
Yep.
The big picture?
How did you feel preparing to walk down the aisle and wait for your bride?
Didn't feel. I've been so used to things like that. It didn't even. I don't even remember it registering on me.
It hadn't registered on you? I mean, it happens though. It must have been a really big day.
Going through all the parades and everything at West Point and everything, you don't get emotional much.
I mean, you must have been happy.
Oh yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And what are some of your favorite memories with your wife?
She was always very sexy.
Oh. That's important.
Yeah. Later on in life, she used to love ice skating, so we'd go ice skating together. And then later on in life, after the children are out of the house, we'd spend a lot of time together. And our activities were traveling and skiing and things like that. So we had a pretty good life.
And you guys went to Norway a couple of times, yes?
2 or 3 times, yeah.
How were those trips?
One trip we took the Heimskringla, which is a boat that goes all the way from Bergen all the way to the northern tip of of Norway and stops at all the little villages along the way. But it's very pleasant and took about I think about 2 weeks altogether. And then we came back to Bergen, and then went to Oslo, and then to Telemark.
That's long. I haven't been to Europe very much. I only had one trip. Are there any other trips that you look back to fondly? Besides Norway, did you travel anywhere else?
We spent some time in Germany.
In Germany?
We had a good time there.
That's good. That's good. I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
Yes. Okay. Alton, is there anything that you wanted to tell us, but we didn't ask you?
No. I have a few secrets in my life.
And any you want to share? This is your opportunity.
Yeah.
He wants to keep the mystery.
No?
No.
Okay, so I have a question to you. Given your life experience and long life career and variety of your experiences, what advice would you give to people that will be watching your interview, perhaps your family members, to us?
I don't have much advice for other people. You just have to take life as it comes to you. And sometimes it's not so pleasant, other times it's great. And you can't control it. Sometimes there's illness, it's unpredictable, and so you just never know. I've just been very lucky, that's all. My wife wasn't lucky. I'd love to have her with me today, but she's not.
Do you miss her?
What's that?
Do you miss your wife?
Oh, yes.
What would you tell her today if you could?
I tell her that I didn't appreciate her enough at the time. I took her too much for granted. But that's just the way we were in those days.
Thank you very much on behalf of Samuel Proctor Oral History Program at University of Florida and myself and my colleagues here.
Okay, good.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm
your
happy
life
to do
story
that.
with
Thank
us.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
you.